Contour Eleanor Jacta O'Brien.
And I understand the Minister may have to leave before I conclude, and I just want to acknowledge that she has already said that to me. So, just in relation to the bill, first of all, can I commend Deputy O'Callaghan for publication of his bill. It's without doubt a very comprehensive and well-drafted piece of legislation, and you can clearly see a lot of thought has gone into it. Particularly in an area where you have to be very careful, because there are constitutional limitations which you have to work around in terms of the appointment of judges. Can I also say that I recognise that the Minister has said that it is her intention to publish the general scheme of a bill at the earliest possible opportunity. Unfortunately, it's something that we've heard on numerous occasions now at this stage, and we still don't have any indication to when that general scheme of the bill will be published. And I think Deputy O'Callaghan has pointed out the contradiction which is facing the government now. On the one hand, where it's saying that you're not going to have any further judicial appointments until you have this new piece of legislation in place. And we have a situation where I think even in the Court of Appeal there are the latest estimates, there's about a backlog of about 1,800 cases, and it's just not something that is acceptable, and it's not something that can continue to or can be allowed to continue. I think government needs to make a decision to either publish the legislation as quickly as possible, we debate it and we pass it, or a decision needs to be made that they will recommence the appointment of judges. Just in relation to our own position, we have a very long-standing position in this area. I mean, in 2003, in the 6 counties, there was a criminal justice review document published which looked at the appointment of judges. And as a result of that review, the Judicial Appointments Commission was given enhanced powers, not only of appointment but also the removal of members of the judiciary within the North. And that is something that we have long supported, and in fact it was a key part of the negotiations with the DUP in 2008 to give those enhanced powers to the Commission within the 6 counties. There is no doubt that there are very similar proposals in terms of what the government is saying they wish to bring forward, as outlined in the programme for government, and the Minister has outlined some of those issues, and also some of the areas which Deputy O'Callaghan has included in his own private member's bill. But for me and from my party, it's not just about the appointment process. There are broader matters which we need to look at. When it comes to the conduct of members of the judiciary, there are very limited means of investigation in relation to their behaviour, where allegations of wrongdoing are being put forward. And there is very little I suppose, constitutional provisions which govern such investigations. And that is an area which I think we could possibly look at during the passage of this bill, or if that is superseded by the publication of the government bill, then I certainly hope that that is something that would be contained within the government proposed legislation. I do know that the government are looking at the possibility of introducing a code of conduct as part of their own general scheme. And I think that's something that did come up in the consultation process which was undertaken in 2014. And if that is the case, then I certainly would welcome that. I do think that there needs to be a code of conduct put in place. But as well as the code of conduct, you have to have, in my opinion, some mechanism to remove judges. And that is something that we need further discussion on. I haven't seen, it's not contained within Deputy O'Callaghan's legislation, which we're debating here tonight. I haven't seen it in the programme for government. The programme for government is very clear on what it's proposing to do. It's proposing to get rid of JAB and introduce a Judicial Appointments Commission. It talks about the make-up of that commission, reducing the number of appointees that would be put forward for government for consideration. And that's all well and good, and that's very similar to what Deputy O'Callaghan is putting forward. But again, there is no mention of the possibility of removing judges, and I think that is something that we need to have a serious look at. And I would hope that if it's not something we can do during the passage of this bill, then it is something that the government can look at in the publication of its own bill. The other area where I think we could possibly have some further discussion is on the make-up of the Commission. Obviously, I don't think the government have indicated what the numbers would be in relation. They have said that it would have a lay majority and it would have a lay chairperson. And again, the bill before us tonight also proposes a lay majority on it. It doesn't go as far as to say there may be a lay chairperson, but it doesn't rule out that possibility either, from my reading of the proposed bill by Deputy O'Callaghan. But I think we could look at Deputy O'Callaghan's legislation. It actually puts into legislation the nominating bodies for those lay persons. I don't know if that's the correct way to go by actually putting it into legislation, but I certainly would agree with Deputy O'Callaghan that the nominating bodies have to have the expertise to know what is needed for any judge which is to be appointed. But I just would like some further discussion on that, and I know Deputy O'Callaghan has said that he's open to that discussion as the bill progresses. Again, just in relation to the sections 8 and 9, which deals with the terms of office, the length of office. It deals with the disqualification and removal of members. And again, I would go back to this, that if you're going to have a comprehensive piece of legislation which is dealing with judicial appointments, which I would hope would deal with a code of conduct and would also deal with the removal of judges, then I think there is much merit to have elements of Deputy O'Callaghan's bill, some of the statements within the programme for government, which hopefully will be reflected in the government's bill. And I think that this is an issue that we can actually find consensus across the chamber in relation to. And I think that's sometimes very, very rare to do. But I think that on this particular issue, there is a general consensus that this system needs to be overhauled. There seems to be a general consensus around a lay majority on any commission. There seems to be a general consensus around the make-up of the commission and also some of the powers. The only other area I think we need to look at is ongoing training for members of the judiciary. I know Deputy O'Callaghan makes some reference to training for people who are being put forward for appointment. But like any other profession, if you're in a position for 20, 30 years, you have to have that continual professional development. And it's my understanding, and I'm no expert in this, but it's my understanding there is no requirement on judges to engage in any continuous professional development. And that is something that they should be engaging in. And whether that can be put into any possible legislation remains to be seen, but it's certainly an area we would like to explore further at committee stage if we get the opportunity to discuss Deputy O'Callaghan's bill. Because, as I said, continuous professional development for judges is as critical as continuous professional development for teachers, or for social workers, or for any other aspect of society. You know, giving the important role that we place on members of the judiciary, I think it's crazy to have a situation where they're not obliged to engage in that continuous professional development. So therefore, you know, we will be supporting the passage of the bill to committee stage. My suspicion is that it's going to be overtaken by the publication of a government bill, which I would hope happens sooner rather than later. I know that Minister Ross has a particular interest in this. I don't think it's any secret that there are probably differing opinions within government on how best to proceed in relation to this. And I would hope that those differing opinions can be met in the very near future, because we cannot have a situation where we're saying on one hand we're not going to appoint any further judges until we actually resolve this, and then have no indication of when this is going to be resolved. It's just not sustainable, and something has to give in relation to this. So again, to commend Deputy O'Callaghan, we will be supporting the passage of the bill to committee stage, and if we do get the opportunity, Deputy O'Callaghan, to discuss it at committee stage, I do acknowledge your willingness to look at the area of the lay representation and maybe how we actually nominate them, and also just to put on the record that we would be looking at some amendments around the introduction of a code of conduct, and also the possibility of giving the Commission extended powers to maybe look at the removal of judges, or at least the recommendation. And of course, with any recommendation to remove a member of the judiciary, there has to be a fair hearing for that member of the judiciary, and there also has to be an appeal mechanism put in place. And again, that's probably something that we need to have a look at as the bill progresses.
O'Brien,